All right. Good morning. My name is Jordan Merrifield. I'm a senior theology student here at Concordia, and I wrote my thesis on how we talk about conversion in American Christianity today. So when I started my research, it was about the question of how we participate in conversion and how we talk about it, and it kind of morphed into more of a comparative analysis on how we talk about it. So in American Christianity, there's a lot of different ways you can ask someone if they've gone through a conversion experience into the Christian religion. There's a lot of different ways, and these are only a few right here on the screen. And if anybody asks someone a question, one of these questions, and someone responds in a positive manner, it's generally assumed by both parties that they understand what has been asked and what has been answered in the same manner, and people move on. So we're left without room to really think about and talk about how we think and talk about these things. So conversion is an important part of doctrine, and doctrine is also sometimes approached as if it's a list of itemized beliefs that you can just kind of work your way through. But as I was going through this process, I began to think of doctrine more like a ball of yarn in which everything is connected, and whenever you pull out one section to look at it, you find out a lot of other sections come with it because they're all intertwined in different ways. And oftentimes you end up with what feels like a mess in your lap by the time you're done. So as a result, how we think about conversion shapes our teaching, preaching, ministry, and really if you think about it, it's the beginning of your Christian journey, and how you think about that is going to shape how you see the rest of your Christian life. So in academic theology, we have 4 different theological streams that approach conversion in different ways. So there's 4 distinct ways that academic theologians like to break it down into. And so this is how I went about my research. I chose a representative for each one. Each representative is well-written, well-liked, well-published. I wanted them to be well-liked by the tradition they represent because I wanted them to kind of be a voice for the people that they are a part of. So those are the 4 people I chose, and then I am Lutheran, so I have a Lutheran bias. I had to try to combat this as much as possible, so I chose to leave the Lutheran tradition for last. That way I would be able to look into the others with a little more of a objective stance as much as is possible. But also, in true Lutheran fashion, I decided to take the critical view and critical analysis that I applied to all the other traditions and turn it on my own. So that was how I tried to make up for that as much as I was able. So my thesis was a comparative literary analysis. So I read a bunch of stuff by each of these authors and then looked at how they talked about conversion in different ways. So as I was going along, I asked a series of 4 questions. Now when I started out, I was just asking the first 3. How do they define conversion? And then how is God seen to interact in conversion? And how is man seen to interact in conversion? Because how we see God and man interacting in our conversion really sets the stage for how we understand our relationship with God throughout the rest of our lives and the rest of doctrine and theology. Important questions. And as I was going along, I was rather forced to ask the question of, is my representative appropriately representing his tradition? And if he's not, why not? What is happening to make him feel he needs to act or speak in a different way that doesn't actually fit what is expected of his tradition? Because, like I said, in academic theology, we have these 4 streams, and with each stream, we have developed, there we go. Within each stream, we have developed a sort of expectational box that each of these theologians will interact in. They'll speak in a different way, and they will speak in a certain way that is particular to their tradition. But as I went along, I found out that my representatives weren't exactly doing that. So the question became, why, oh dear. The question became, why are they not representing their traditions? What is happening here that's making them think that they need to do so in a different, speak in a different way? So in my reading of the Calvinist and Arminian traditions, I found that they had a really great way of speaking that everyone understood. The people in the pew understood, the pastors understood, the academics understood. Everyone could see where they were going and the points they were making. But conversion theology is a complex theology, and the way they were going about it was a rather simplified answer, and there's a bit of a dilemma between predestination and the free will, whether or not God has control over our lives and whether or not we have control over our lives. And as true Americans, we want to say that we have control over our own fate. But this is not always easy for us to talk about because we want to say that we have control and we don't want to give that up to God. So the Calvinist Arminians tend to focus on this bit of a dilemma that they get caught up in, and their language reflects that. Now the Catholic and the Lutheran traditions offer a bit of a broader perspective that recognizes the complexity of conversion theology in light of the rest of the picture of doctrine. So they go, okay, it's a small part of the big picture. Yes, it's a dilemma, but when we look at it in the light of who God is and who we are with God, it's not such a big deal anymore because it's a part of God's predestination, or God's foreknowledge of what's going to happen is a part of who God is. And so it's not necessarily a question of whether or not it's our free will versus his predestination, but they are a part of each other because we are creatures to our Creator. So the Catholic and Lutherans offer this great complex view that recognizes the complexity and tries to take in as much as they can, but they don't always talk about it in a way that everyone in the pew understands. So I think that this is something that the Calvinists and the Arminians could offer the Catholics and the Lutherans. I think that they could offer a way of talking that everybody understands, because it's a great theology and it's a great aspect of our traditions that kind of help us understand ourselves better and help us understand each other's better. So I really think that these are two things we could offer each other. So the Catholics and the Lutherans could offer a view that includes the complexity of the conversion theology, whereas the Arminians and the Calvinists could offer a language that everyone understands. So I think that this is something that we could learn from each other in open and honest dialogue, which doesn't happen very often between denominations. And I think that this would benefit the mission of the church overall, because if we understand ourselves better, then we're going to understand the people we're going out to minister to better. Further, if you only have one idea of conversion, if you think of it as a single box, and you go outside the church and you try to minister to someone else, and they start to convert like a different kind of box, you're not going to see it or expect it or minister to them in the same way as if you had been in an open, honest dialogue with these other traditions, and your idea of conversion included others rather than just your own. And then last but not leastly, I think a use of parables might be a helpful way to do this. So Jesus taught many complex theologies through the use of parables, because it was a language that everybody understood, but then you were able to layer the complexity in there so that later it can be peeled back as more is understood. And so I suggested that this could perhaps be a way that we could talk about conversion theology in a new, slightly different way that allows for room for the complexity, but also in a language that everybody would understand. So, thank you. Thank you to my advisor. I would not have made it anywhere near where I have without Professor Brandt and my other committee members. Any questions? Yes.
In our multifaceted American society, are there any parables that do have overarching meaning for the many people that there are in this country?
I would say that all of the parables do have multiple meanings in some way or another. The parable of the Prodigal Son is one that I studied specifically during this, and it has so many layers that can be peeled back in different ways to look at it from the son that left or the son that stayed at home's perspective, or even from the father's perspective. So I would say that like any of the parables in the New Testament really have multiple ways that they can be interpreted.
I guess my question was, you talk about modern parables, like taking, making them more modern. Are there any out there right now that are being floated in the theological community?
So I guess I should have specified my parable thing. It's more of like a thought baby at this point that I haven't actually developed all the way. Because I didn't end my thesis with one major conclusion. I ended up with like several minor conclusions, and that was one of them. It's a suggestion, and it's something that I think that could be developed in later thought. But I don't really have a lot of answers as far as that goes. Sorry. Any other questions?